both because it always saves it on the cloud. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So we're posting this video here on YouTube today because we want to share with you some tips and tricks on some topics that we've had students reach out to us about. So we're going to be using this video to talk about reinforcement, punishment, unconditioned and conditioned, and generally schedules of reinforcement. So we hope this video finds you well. If you want to join these meetings live, we have our Instagram that you could follow. The link is below to our direct Instagram account, and you can join these live so you can have access to the Zoom calls. We do these every night. And for more information, it'll be all posted under the description part of this video. Okay. So, hold on, let me skip all of this. Basically, we're going to be going into the contingencies of reinforcement. We're going to ignore this for now. So contingencies of reinforcement. I started the slides with explaining the contingencies of reinforcement so you guys can have an overall view and understanding of what a contingency of reinforcement is. I'm starting with the basics all the way from the top so you guys can have a better understanding of why this term comes into play. So the contingencies of reinforcement refers to the consequence of a behavior matters. Whatever the consequence of a behavior is, it's important because it's how we're able to determine how we're going to manipulate behavior and how we're able to make modifications for behavior. The consequence of everything we do affects how we do it and whether we do it in the future. Some consequences can be highly motivating. Some consequences can have a very large effect on our behavior to the point that we may only need to learn a lesson once. This is why the contingencies of reinforcement matter, because it affects our behavior outcome. And depending on what that consequence is, we either do it more or we do it less. Then there's other consequences that have a very small effect or no effect at all. All of this is going to make sense once we start to go into actual reinforcement and punishment. Does anybody have any questions? Is anybody taking down notes so I could stop really quick?
If you guys are, it's okay that we're recording. You can speak. You can tell us to stay on this slide for a second. It's no big deal.
I'll just like cut out these parts so you know, so it doesn't affect.
So we're good to go? Yes?
Going.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so this is initially the question that we're trying to figure out when we're talking about reinforcement and punishment. Is the consequence added or removed contingent upon a behavior? So contingent meaning depending on the behavior. So behavior occurs, is a consequence added or removed? And does the behavior increase or decrease in the likelihood? These are the two questions that you should be asking yourself whenever you're trying to determine in a question or in any type of theory, if we're talking about reinforcement or punishment. These are your two go-to questions. You read your description and you ask yourself these two questions. Is something or is the consequence added or removed? And does the behavior increase or decrease in likelihood? Okay, so there is the 3-term contingency, and then there's also the 4-term contingency. The 3-term contingency is antecedent, behavior, consequence, which is ABC. That's what the 3-term contingency stands for. And then there's a 4-term contingency, which has the MO, antecedent, behavior, and consequence. These are just for you to know, little keys to self. So now we're going to get into the actual understanding of the difference between reinforcement and punishment. So reinforcement is a type of consequence that has an effect on behavior that makes you do that behavior more in the future. So a behavior occurs, you either add something or you take it away, specifically for reinforcement, you're adding something, and it's making the behavior occur more in the future. So behaviors that result in highly desirable outcomes are likely to be repeated again in the future. This is the most basic definition of reinforcement. Is everybody with me? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Like I said, if you guys need to write anything down, it's 100% safe to do so. Just let me know so I don't keep going. So the technical definition of reinforcement, based off of the Cooper book, is a consequence that results in an increase or maintenance in the future probability of behavior. So this is like using the big words. How I explained it above is kind of trying to use more layman terms so you guys can understand it better. But this is the actual terminology that you would need to understand. A consequence that results in an increase or maintenance in the future probability of a behavior. Come on. Okay. So really big comparison that you have to make. Reinforcement is not bribery. It is not a form of bribery. For definition purposes, a bribe is where you give someone a reward before they do a behavior. Usually a behavior that is morally questionable. So many times reinforcement is one of those terms that gets has like, I guess, misinterpretation because it kind of seems like a bribery, like, we will give you this only if you do this, but that is not what the definition of reinforcement is, and that's not how it works. Because a bribe, by definition, is where you give someone a reward before they do a behavior. For reinforcement is after they do a behavior. Do you guys see the difference? Bribe is before, reinforcement is after. What is reinforcement? It's where you give a reward after a behavior, and it is intentionally used to strengthen moral behaviors that benefit the learner. That is what reinforcement is. So it is not bribery. It is when you get a reward after a behavior. And it has an intention to strengthen behaviors in the future. Okay, more on reinforcement. This is to really get you guys understanding and really thinking and seeing the difference between reinforcement and punishment when they're placed together. So here we go again. Reinforcement works equally well on desired and undesired behaviors. You have to keep that in mind. We can have a reinforcement situation and it could be for a desired or an undesired behavior. Our jobs as behavior technicians is to ensure that adaptive behaviors are getting lots of reinforcement and maladaptive behaviors are not. Always keep in mind your duty as a behavior tech, what it is that you're supposed to be reinforcing and what it is that you're not supposed to be reinforcing. So lots of reinforcement.
What is maladaptive?
Oh, maladaptive are like the bad behaviors, like the unwanted behaviors. That's what maladaptive is.
Okay.
Very important to know that word, how it's written, maladaptive, because they love to use that word. That is their favorite vocabulary. This is like one of those terminology that you just have to know. But yeah, it's just another word for challenging behavior.
Okay.
No problem. Okay. So critically important to know and understand that reinforcement is words that I don't know how to say. Idiosyncratic, which means that they may be reinforcing to you, but will not necessarily be reinforcing to others. Also a term that you have to know, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a fancy word to say that it depends on the person. Something could be reinforcing to me, like for example, I can be a person, I don't know, this is very random, but if I like to get hit and you hit me and I continue to do a behavior, I don't know, you slap me in the face and I'm like, yeah, woohoo, I'm still gonna keep spitting everywhere because that's what I want to do. And hitting me is actually reinforcing to me because I'm continuing to do the behavior. then we are reinforcing that behavior. It's reinforcing to me. But maybe for you, slap you in the face and you stop doing the behavior. So you can't just deem something like a positive thing just because it's positive in your aspect, or because technically speaking, a slap to the face is not something that should bring reinforcement, but everyone is different. If that is something that brings reinforcement to you, you have the science or the data that explains it. What happens before the behavior? What is the behavior, and then what happens after? If I slapped you, did you continue to do the behavior? Did it increase or did it decrease? That's why you have to go back and keep in mind that you're asking yourself those two questions. Did the behavior increase or decrease as a result of what was implemented? And that's how you determine if something was reinforcement or not. So only thing that makes something a reinforcer for someone is that it works to increase their behavior. Do not assume that something is going to be a reinforcer until you see it working. A pause for dramatic effect. So far, what did we learn? These are the main little tips and tricks that we've learned up to this point from everything I've said. That reinforcement is a type of consequence that increases the future probability of a behavior in the future. Yeah. It is not bribery. What might be reinforcing to one person may not be reinforcing to someone else. Oops. So those are the three things basically all summed up that we have learned up to this point about reinforcement. If there's anything you're going to take from this video, this would be like per to say the summary page, the main idea. These are the three things that you want to keep in mind with reinforcement. And here are some basic examples of everyday. So consequences that have very high effects on our behavior to the point that we only have to experience once to learn our lesson. Putting your finger in an outlet and getting shocked. Put your finger in an outlet, you get shocked. Well, what did you learn? Can't put my finger in the outlet because it's going to hurt. It's going to cause me pain. Behaviors that result in very desirable outcomes are likely to be repeated again in the future. An example of this would be taking a particular route to work and experiencing little traffic. More than likely in the future, you are going to drive that route again compared to other routes. So you take a turnpike or you take the same road every day, and then today you decide to take an alternative route and you see that there's no traffic on that route. The probability that you're going to try to take that route again to go to work is going to increase because you got a positive effect from it. You got a reinforcer. You got to work faster. You didn't have to deal with being in traffic. Okay. Now we're going to go into the depths of positive and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement. Don't forget the definition of what reinforcement was in general. Remember that we cared that the future probability of the behavior is going to increase. That's what reinforcement still means. Now we're going into if we're adding or removing something. That's the only difference that happens when you put the word positive or negative in front of reinforcement. Either we're adding something or removing it. Reinforcement can be further subclassified in whether something is given or taken away from the person's environment. Positive is that something is being given, added, a stimulus is being added to the environment. Something is being added. Something that wasn't there before is present now in the environment. That is what positive means. So eliminate from your head that positive means something good, that positive is like a reward. Positive for purposes of ABA and for positive reinforcement definition means adding something. A stimulus is added to the environment. And here we go again with the technical term. Altogether, positive reinforcement is that a consequence that is added to an individual's environment that results in a future strengthening of that behavior. So here are some common examples. So you could put it in your head, in your memory box, things that you could, I guess, associate with positive reinforcement examples. Common examples could be access to tangibles or activities. So things that you like, being able to get your iPad if that's, the preferred thing for the individual, or being able to engage in an activity you like jumping on the trampoline. Access to tangible, having access to something. Social approval, which in quotation, attention. Somebody giving you attention. It could be a hug. It could be tickles. It could be praise. Good job. You did it. All of those are forms of attention, social approval. So access to tangibles, things that you want or activities, social approval, attention, preferred food, which in other words, it's edibles. So like, I don't know, if you're an individual that gets motivated by food, like snacks, M&Ms, that could be a form of positive reinforcement. You're adding something. And money, just to use a more basic, generalized reinforcer, would be money. Money is something that we all work very hard to get because money can get us other things. So let's think. Can you come up with your own examples of positive reinforcement? Can anyone give an example of positive reinforcement? Anyone? No? Okay, don't worry. I have some examples coming up. So these are some examples that I included for you guys for positive reinforcement. So Timmy follows directions while at the grocery store with parent. Parent gets Timmy his favorite chocolate bar at checkout. So that's an example. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He follows directions. He's listening to instructions. He's following his mom. He's staying near his parent. Whatever it is that his initial directions are while he's in the grocery store, he's not running away. He's not grabbing things that he's not supposed to be grabbing. Whatever the rules are that were set for him, he's following, compliant with the directions. And when they left, parent got Timmy his favorite chocolate bar. Positive reinforcement. That would be edible or preferred food. Next example, Joy raises his hand in class quietly. Teacher calls on Joy to take a turn. So Joy is sitting in class. He's raising his hand quietly. He's not making any disruptions in the classroom. He's doing whatever the set direction was. Sit quietly, raise your hand. And because he had his hand up, he was called to answer or to take a turn. That is a form of positive reinforcement. That could be like a social thing, social praise, so attention. Hilda sits quietly and patiently to wait till her mother is done on the phone to ask her a question. Same thing, listening to directions, following instructions, waiting for her mom to continue or finish her conversation on the phone, and then proceeds to being able to ask the question. So the mother says, "Thank you so much for waiting," a form of praise. And then from here, she should proceed to give her the attention that she wanted or to listen to her question. So these are all good forms of positive reinforcement. This one that's highlighted in red wouldn't be a good form of positive reinforcement. So this goes back to when we had said that not all forms of positive reinforcement can lead to a good outcome. So for this example purposes is what that statement was made for. Pablo wants a candy bar when they are in the grocery store, but mom tells him not today. Pablo starts yelling and crying. As a result, for the mom to stop getting Pablo to continue to yell and cry, she proceeds to giving the candy bar so he can stop making a scene in the grocery store. This is still a form of positive reinforcement. She added something because he's getting his candy bar. And he's probably going to do the yelling and crying again in the future because it gave him reinforcement in this moment. That is not an effective way to provide reinforcement. In this situation, what would have been correct is if she would have let him continue to cry, basically ignore this behavior and only give him the candy bar or whatever it was if he asked using his words or if he wasn't misbehaving or engaging in tantrums. So this would be like not the appropriate way to do it, but it's also considered a form of positive reinforcement. And that's why you have to really read the questions and the statements with all full potential and break it down. Is something being added or taken away? And is the behaviors gonna increase or decrease in future probability? Okay, so now we have negative reinforcement. Here we have the definition. Negative is something is taken away, a stimulus is removed from the environment. For technical purposes, this is the definition: the removal of a consequence that results in an increase in the behavior that resulted in that removal. These are just the basic definitions of negative reinforcement. So here are some common examples: removing loud sounds, asking for a break. These are forms of negative reinforcement. Something is being removed, which increases the probability of the future behavior. So, same thing. Can you come up with your own examples? You can write them down on a piece of paper. You could think about them yourself. It just helps you learn the stuff quicker. So come up with your own examples, write them down, or say them out loud. So here are the examples I provided for you guys. So Mercy is given a PowerPoint project to complete. She raises her hand and asks for a break. Mercy is given a break and returns to her assignment. This is a form of negative reinforcement. She asks for a break and a break is given to her. Something is removed, which is, the current her having to be time on task. Like she's on a task, but she appropriately asked for a break, and that removal of that specific task was given to her. That break was given to her. And since she got reinforced for it, likely in the future, she's going to ask for a break the correct way to do her break for her assignment. Next example. Frances is sitting in Mercy's car and she starts to play Bad Bunny music so loud the car is vibrating. Frances asks Mercy if she can put down the volume. Mercy puts down the volume. This goes back to the common example of loud sounds. The music is loud, it's bothering Frances. She doesn't like the music loud in her ears, the car is vibrating. She used verbal prompting to ask Mercy if she could put it down, and Mercy did. Removal of unwanted noise. And Frances will likely engage in asking Mercy nicely to put down the volume of the car, of the music. Next example is Pepito is too tired to get up and go to work today, so he calls in sick to his boss. Pepito's boss tells him it's okay to not come in today to feel better. So same thing. Pepito didn't want to go to work today. Pepito called his boss. He picked up the phone. He was like, hey, I'm sick. Don't want to go to work. And Pepito's boss was like, no problem. He's getting reinforced. And he removed the act of having to go into work, which is what he didn't want. Removing something unwanted. Reinforced, increased. Consequence, in the future, he's going to probably call again to not have to go into work. And, he's not getting in trouble. So those are, good examples, I guess you would say, of reinforcement. This is like how we want things to flow. If things are flowing in this way, this is good implementation of therapy, I guess. Now, this example on the bottom, which is in red, is Timmy is having a hard time completing his math timetables and he puts his head down. Okay, so we're in therapy session. Timmy doesn't want to do his tasks. He gets upset. He puts his head down. This is what the teacher responds. The teacher sends Timmy outside to sit in the hallway. So she's basically giving him a break without asking or completing his assignment. This is considered not the best way to respond to this because he's putting his head down. And instead of her trying to redirect him to continue to finish his task or to teach him how to say, hey, can I have a break? She just let him sit outside in the hallway, have a break for putting his head down. So she is reinforcing the putting the head down behavior instead of, hey, I want a break. Can I have a break? Or after you do this, then you can have a break, kind of role that we would want the consequence to be. So now in this situation, what's being reinforced is him putting his head down. So in the future, Timmy is probably going to put his head down more often to be able to escape completing his timetables. I hope everybody is understanding. So I'm going to keep going. Now, so here are things to keep in mind from what we went over for negative reinforcement. Delete from your head that negative refers to the effect it has on the behavior. Now that you deleted it, negative refers to something being removed. Negative is not how it affects the behavior. It's about something being removed. Okay, very important to keep that in your mind. More recapping because I love to recap. Putting it all together now. Positive reinforcement is when doing a behavior results in being given something that is preferred. Positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is when doing a behavior results in taking away something non-preferred. Okay? Once again, if you haven't been writing notes up to this point, if there's anything that you want to write down, this would probably be a great slide. So both negative and positive reinforcement can increase either desired or undesired behaviors. Both negative and positive reinforcement depends on how we deliver it and timing. Those are key factors that are important. How it's delivered and timing. It has to happen immediately after the behavior. And both are reinforcement because they increase the strength of a given behavior. So that's what they both have in common. And this is what differentiates them. To recap this side. Okay. Going to continue. Oh, here I have some questions. So, all right, so I'm going to read the question. I'm going to give everyone a couple of minutes or whatever to answer. And then we'll go over it. So Sam is an RBT who is working with his client, Amber. Amber is given a cutting and pasting activity to do. Amber starts her activity, and then after a couple of minutes, she starts to throw her scissors, pieces of cut paper and glue on the floor. Sam asks Amber to pick it up, but she just puts her head down. Sam gets up, picks up all the materials, and tells Amber to go play outside for a little. Amber goes outside to play. This is the second time Amber has done this week. What is this an example of?
Negative? What am I supposed to answer?
I think you said negative. Let's see. So it's not positive reinforcement. It is not unconditioned reinforcement. I know we haven't gone over this, but we will. It is not just reinforcement because it's much deeper than that. And you're right. It is negative reinforcement. So awesome job. Thank you for answering and participating. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
So yes, the answer is negative reinforcement. Why? Because Sam asks Amber to pick it up, but she just puts her head down. This kind of goes back to the same example that I had given you guys when I was going over the examples of negative reinforcement. She put her head down, and the RBT decided to get up and actually clean up the stuff for her. The correct action here could have been for her to prompt Amber to pick up her stuff, redirect her back to the actual task, and then tell her that if she wants a break, to ask for break, kind of thing. That would have been a better form to react to this, but it still is a form of negative reinforcement because she let her escape. She let her do her thing anyways, and she didn't have to get any compromise for it. Next is another question. I'm going to read it and then I'll give you guys a few seconds also to read it again and answer. So a child is watching an adult TV show and hears a bad word. The child proceeds to repeating the bad word a couple times while they are alone in their room. The next day, the child is in the car with their father and the child says, "Papa, can you turn the music up?" The father, taken by surprise, starts laughing hysterically and turns the music up. The child proceeds to using this word in other environments, and shortly the parents get a call from school about the child's use of profanity in the school. What is this an example of? Gonna mute myself really quick. Give you guys a couple seconds. What is wrong with my mouse? Okay, so it is not negative reinforcement. It is not bad parenting. The answer is not positive punishment. The answer is positive reinforcement. So, explanation as to why the answer is positive reinforcement. If we go back to the whole explanation and story, she hears a bad word, she repeats the bad word a couple times. Okay, so point is that when she is in the car with her father, she says the bad word that she hears. And the father, at that moment, he was taken by surprise, and initially his reaction was to start laughing hysterically. So what happened here? She got reinforcement, social praise, basically, because the dad was laughing. So it provided her with a type of reinforcement. She is receiving social praise, laughing, reaction of father. And he also proceeds to turn the music up after she used the bad word, He should have redirectioned, mentioned, "Oh, don't say this," to decrease the frequency of this behavior happening in the future. But now she was conditioned because he laughed hysterically and also reinforced it by turning up the music with that specific command that she made. Like, "Papa, can you turn the music up?" So something was added, which was the hysterically laughing, turns the music up. Behavior is going to happen in the future. And the reason why we know it's happening in the future is because the child proceeds to using the word in other environments, and shortly the parent gets a call from the school about the child's use of profanity. So it was reinforced because the occurrence of this increases in the future. Okay. So that was reinforcement. We went over what reinforcement was in general. We went over positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and what contingency was or is. Now we're going to discuss condition and unconditioned reinforcement. So, condition and unconditioned reinforcement. Within the reinforcement umbrella, the distinction between condition and unconditioned is another important one. We have to understand what the difference is. I'm not going to make you guys tell me what you think conditioned reinforcement and unconditioned reinforcement is, but take a moment, pause the video, and think about what you think this is, or obviously if you've been studying, you should have more or less of an idea. This helps you formulate questions and better understand the material. So for definition purposes, we're going to go straight into it. Unconditioned reinforcement, based off a definition, is where the effectiveness of a reinforcer does not depend on a learning history. Does somebody have a question? Okay. So where the effectiveness of a reinforcer does not depend on a learning history. Remember that we already learned what reinforcement, the word reinforcement, was by definition. Increases the future probability of a behavior occurring. Now we're learning the definition of unconditioned. Unconditioned means that It does not depend on a learning history. We didn't have to learn this. We didn't have to put 2 and 2 together. We didn't have to do pairing and unpairing to get this into our system. It's something that we naturally do. We were born this way. Survival of the fittest. If it's part of who we are as humans. So the consequence is simply a reinforcer due to genetics and natural selection in the evolution of the species. So a condition, we're humans. This is stuff that we do because we are humans, because we need shelter, because we need food and water. That is what you should put into your brain when we're thinking about unconditioned. People did not need to learn them. They are reinforcers for all humans. Eating is a reinforcer for all humans because if we don't eat, we die. Sleeping is a reinforcer for all humans because if we do not sleep, we die. So kind of think about it like that. If you don't do it, you die. Unconditioned. Here are some typical examples I was just mentioning of unconditioned reinforcement. Food, water, warmth, escape from extreme temperatures, so either too hot or too cold, escape from loud noises, escape from physically painful stimulation. Something hurts, brings us pain. Those are not things that we were conditioned, or nobody had to teach us how to feel pain. Nobody had to teach us that loud noises were uncomfortable to our ears. And also nobody had to teach us how to deal with extreme temperatures. We were born and we shiver because, it's cold and our body reacts this way to all these types of stimulations. And that is why we seek a specific type of consequence or reaction or response when we're in these situations. Okay. Now we have conditioned reinforcement. Reinforcers that have obtained their effectiveness because of the learning history of a person. So once again, we already know what reinforcement is because we just went over it. Now we're learning the definition of conditioned. Condition is that it does have a learning history. It's effective as a reinforcer because of the learning history. We paired 2 and 2. It happened, and we learned from that previous learning history that these two get us to this. Get us what we want, or increases the likelihood of us engaging in that behavior. So reinforcer that are acquired during the lifetime of the person and vary greatly from person to person. Keep that in mind. These condition reinforcers or condition reinforcement is not something that we all together as a group share. Everyone has different forms of reinforcement. What could be reinforcement to me doesn't necessarily have to be reinforcement to you. Condition reinforcement. This is something that you learned. Like maybe you love Cheerios and that's like a huge reinforcer for you. For me, that is not. It's a punishment. Give me Cheerios and I hate it and I will not work for Cheerios. But maybe you were conditioned to love Cheerios and that is a great reinforcer for you. So most commonly, these stimuli become condition reinforcers by being paired with this existing reinforcers. So the example I gave to Cheerios, specifically Cheerios, like that cereal, we're talking about cereals. It's also paired with an existing reinforcer, like, the fact that we eat to survive. It's a pairing of, eating to survive, but that specification to Cheerios, because I can eat anything to survive, you just need to eat to survive. That specification of Cheerios is what makes it a conditioned reinforcer. So having a preference between one type of chocolate and another. Some of us like M&Ms, other of us don't like M&Ms and we like, I don't know, Snickers, Twix, whatever. Having that preference is due to conditioned behaviors, due to condition through pairing, through constant pairing of your history. That's how we were able to obtain that preference. Okay. So condition reinforcement, here is an example of classic example of condition reinforcement. So this is based off of the Cooper book, going back to the theory, the book, the main idea of how we came to understand condition reinforcement and why it is what it is. And the textbook example. This is why I included this here. So Pavlov's dog. Pavlov was a Russian researcher in the early 20th century that was the first scientist to document that when a dog repeatedly contacts a neutral stimulus, aka a bell, immediately before a strong stimulus, food, then the bell comes to function as the strong stimulus. Specifically, when the bell had been paired with the food multiple times, so multiple pairing. This is why I keep saying pairing. This is pairing and conditioned go hand in hand. When the dog only heard the bell, so now he didn't have to see the food. He just had to hear the bell because of the pairing, the bell and the food. He would salivate. So he automatically has the same response that he would to just food with the bell because of the pairing.
I
That's why
literally
it's-
saw that on my test.
yeah. So this
Like
is the
literally.
textbook example. And it's
Okay.
where the conditioned thing comes to play. So showing that pairing the bell with the food made the bell have some of the same effects on behavior as food. That's what makes a difference between conditioned and unconditioned. Here, I guess if you guys want like a note to take away, if you're gonna make notes on anything, I guess this would be the best page too. Oopsie. Oh no. Here. This is the same thing that we just went over right now, what I explained with words. This is kind of like less words and a little bit of a drawing, but it's the same exact explanation. Respondent conditioning, aka classical conditioning, the Pavlov higher order conditioning, stimulus pairing. These are all AKAs, other words for the same thing. So before conditioning, A, B, unconditioned stimulus, the pizza. So unless you're taught that pizza is delicious because you've had it and whatever, it's unconditioned. And then we have the unconditioned response, salivate. So you see food, salivate, neutral stimulus, bell. No response. So we show you the bell, you're not gonna have a response to the bell because that's not conditioned yet. That's before conditioning. Then we do conditioning. During conditioning, we pair the neutral stimulus, which is the bell, with the unconditioned stimulus, which is the food, food, pairing, bell, food. You start to salivate, which is your unconditional response, to both of these things being paired. And then after conditioning, so once this is done multiple times, your conditioned stimulus, I just ring the bell and you start to salivate. I don't even have to show you the pizza. You just hear ding and you're like, dinner's ready, hungry, because you make that pairing. Just in another perspective, same thing that we discussed in the previous slide with pictures and like a little diagram, I guess. Okay. So now condition reinforcement. A major goal for us while working with children with learning disabilities or ASD is to be able to establish stimuli for which the learner is not motivated by at first, example, attention, to be reinforcers by repeatedly pairing them with stimuli that are already reinforcers, video games, candy, etc. So I added this detail here because it's like, why is this whole theory of condition reinforcement so important? Well, it's because it's the basis of all ABA. It's like what we do. How do we motivate these kids to do what they have to do, or these individuals to do what it is that they're supposed to do? It's because of this theory. This theory is what allows us to do that. This is why whenever you give a reinforcer, you should pair it with praise. Every time a reinforcer is given, you should pair it with praise. So after much pairing with praise and the reinforcer, you are pairing praise with the potent reinforcement, as a result, conditioning praise to be a reinforcer in the future. The reason why that's mentioned here is because, yeah, we can use edibles, for example, like M&Ms to motivate someone to work for us or like to do what they have to do. But we don't want them to always depend on receiving an M&M every time that they do what they're supposed to be doing. That's why you pair it with praise, which would be like the bell, So pair the M&M with praise. Good job, good job, good job. And then you start to use variable, interval. And then you just give them praise for doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you don't give them an M&M. and and M&M. So praise, just praise, and then eventually they work for just praise. And another example of this would be tokens. So a token system. The token reinforcement, that you get a token for every accomplishment you make, and then you get these tokens and you can trade it in for a better reinforcer. An example of this is like money. That's like a type of token system. Okay, so this is also just to like get you guys thinking. I'm gonna read over, then give you guys a couple of minutes to read them over and answer the questions on your own. So let's play a game. The objective here is to determine if the statement that's being made is condition reinforcement or unconditioned reinforcement. Number 1, person is running at the park and searches for a water fountain because they are thirsty. Is this condition reinforcement or unconditioned? Number 2, putting up a picture on Instagram to get likes. Number 3, person covers their ears because there was a sudden explosion outside. Number 4, person steps on a mouse trap after yelling for a couple of seconds. They proceed to taking it off. Number 5, Tony works 8-hour shifts Monday through Friday to get money to be able to buy himself a Lambo. Number 6, whenever your phone dings, you check your phone. Number 7, Zach is laying in bed and gets up to search the kitchen because his stomach is grumbling. And number 8, the doorbell rings or dings, so you go to see who is at the door. I'm gonna pause for a couple seconds or minutes so you guys can think about it, and then I'll show you guys the answer. Okay. So let's go over it. Number 1, the person is running at the park and searches for a water fountain because they are thirsty. Is it conditioned? Oh, well, there you go. It's unconditioned reinforcement. Number 2, putting up a picture on Instagram to get likes. Conditioned reinforcement or unconditioned reinforcement? This is conditioned reinforcement. You know, pairing had to understand that this type of thing will give you reinforcement through previous history of pairing and pairing and pairing. Number 3, person covers their ears because there was a sudden explosion outside. Conditioned or unconditioned? Unconditioned reinforcement. Nobody had to teach us this. It's something that we have as humans. Person steps on a mousetrap after yelling for a couple seconds, they proceed to taking it off. Unconditioned reinforcement. Tony works 8-hour shifts Monday through Friday to get money to be able to buy himself a Lambo. Conditioned reinforcement. Whenever your phone dings, you check your phone. Conditioned reinforcement. Zach is laying in bed and gets up to search the kitchen because his stomach is grumbling. Unconditioned reinforcement. And the last one, the doorbell dings, so you go to see who is at the door. Also conditioned reinforcement. So I hope these examples helped you guys kind of put it into perspective and better understand where you would see the difference of these two in an example. And that is all for today. Mercy, if you can hear me, you can stop sharing or recording.
Okay. Thank you guys for joining and listening.